All right, check, check, check. 1 2 1 2. This is part 2 of the cultivation theory exercise. I don't have the best technology at all times, so I apologize for that. The last question I asked you to pause the video and answer for question 3. Is television class? Do people with less money watch more TV? So, I'm curious. And maybe it's not the proper forum for this, and maybe I won't pose this as a question. I just want you to think about it. How many of you use the TV for background noise? Basically, research shows that in homes lower on the socioeconomic strata here. TV is used as background noise. I know in the house I grew up, I wouldn't say we were bad off or anything. We used the TV as background noise. But when I first started working in Rochester Hills, Michigan, with kids of higher socioeconomic standing, kids whose parents bought them like Mercedes and BMWs to go to school with, this concept was almost foreign. They didn't come home and use the television as a babysitter. They didn't come home and turn on the TV. They were sent straight to sports practice or piano lessons or dance recitals. All of these things change based on socioeconomic conditions. So this is what the research is pointing towards in cultivation theory. That cultivation theory, that television has an incredible impact on the way we perceive the world. The research doesn't suggest that TV programming, or quote, TV programming seeks to persuade the audience to think or act in a particular way. Instead, Gerbner argues that the repetitive representation of commercialized social life is what audiences come to expect and believe as more or less normative. End quote. So this is, the effects here are not huge, but they are consistent. They are consistent effects across the board through the research here. The original research was focused on this mean and scary world effect. So the idea that from the original exercise that we did in part 1 of this video lecture is people who watch more TV believe that the world is a mean and scary place. Now, violence here is it's crucial that we define this, because Gerbner, doesn't necessarily mean that every show you watch has to have, some kind of, bloody scene. This is not the Joker movie. It's not, severe violence around every corner. Violence, defined by Gerbner, is, quote, an overt expression of physical force, with or without a weapon, against self or others, compelling action against one's will on pain of being hurt and or killed, or threats to be so victimized as part of the plot. So this includes cartoon violence, such as Tom and Jerry, The Simpsons. So you might not view The Simpsons as an inherently violent thing, but when Homer Simpson strangles Bart, he is depicting violence. We might not even register that as violent in the way that we see like the Joker movie. It is comedic or, humorous violence, like the Three Stooges, right? And then there's accidental violence. This is when, somebody, falls down the stairs and we laugh at it. That's kind of what's going on here. So what I would like you to do is, I've posted links to 2 videos. I would like you to watch those to get kind of an example of what's going on. And then I would like you to, after you watch those examples, I would like you to reflect. This is question 4. What are some other examples you can think of where violence is televised? It doesn't have to be overt. You might think of, so I think of when I was a kid watching something like, Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner. We know that Wile E. Coyote is going to be able to blow himself up by his thumb after an anvil flattens him, right? But this is still a depiction of violence. So pause your video, answer what are some other examples of violence you can think of. Okay. So the violence index is, quote, an objective research instrument that uses content analysis to measure the prevalence, frequency, and role of characters involved in TV violence, end quote. This is this is a this is a this is an example of social science. So from the beginning of the semester, we talk about social science. The violence index is an example of social science. So content analysis is when somebody is counting the themes, the phrases, the words, the text in order to calculate the frequency and to make some kind of objective comparison. So somebody might say Tom and Jerry is more violent than the Three Stooges because of the acts of violence that are committed. Basically, what the studies, what many studies since Gerbner's have been conducted, and what we know is that on primetime television, there's an average of 5 violent acts per episode. So that's all primetime television. So you're watching, I don't know what people watch on primetime television anymore, but you're watching, say, an award show, okay? And the presenter is up there with their co-presenter, and they say something, funny, and the guy looks at them and holds their hand up or something, okay? That's a threat of violence. That would be counted as an act of violence. It doesn't have to be somebody actually physically pushing them or verbally threatening them. It can just be something like this, okay? Holding your hand up, shaking your hand, shaking your fist at something is going to be counted as an act of violence. There's an allusion to violence. Now, if primetime television, which is typically consumed by adults, averages 5 acts of violence per episode, children's program is much worse. 20 acts of violence per episode in children's programming. So this might seem kind of difficult to digest because we don't think of children's programming as, these super violent places. But in actuality, even things that are not Tom and Jerry or not Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner are very violent. Children's programming is super violent. Even the threats of violence. I remember, I don't know if I would be able to recall any ones that you grew up watching, but something like, Boy Meets World or Clarissa Explains. Oh, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Let's just take that, for example. When Uncle Phil throws Jazzy Jeff out the front door, that's an act of violence that would be counted. We don't think of that show as a violent show, but that is a violent act that's used for comedic effect. So I'm curious, this is question 5. I would like to ask, why do you think children's television is more violent? There's no wrong answers, no right answers, really. I'm just curious at what your theory is as to why children's programming might be more violent. So I would like you to pause the video and just answer. This is question 5. Why do you think children's television is more violent? Okay, so what I would like to do now is just share a couple more things about this. I don't want this to go on forever. I would like to keep the total amount of video that we created under 20 minutes, so you're not sitting there watching this forever. But the research shows that characters that are victimized are disproportionately of minority backgrounds. I think this is an important fact that comes out of the research around cultivation theory, that we see minority figures disproportionately victimized in television. I think we should reflect on this a little bit because we do see it now as a trope. If you've ever seen Scary Movie, there's the trope that the black man is always the first one to go in a horror film. This is not just in horror films. This stretches out throughout many, many different types of media. The research also found that minorities are underrepresented with compared to their actual numbers in society. I think that's important to also take into consideration. So they're not only victimized more, but they are underrepresented. Hey, you're cold. Why are you cold? Let me finish this real quick, and then we'll go play, okay? So my question 6, do you think representation... So minorities are underrepresented in media, but they're overrepresented when it comes to acts of violence. So the question is, question 6, do you think this representation plays a role in how we perceive others and ourselves? So wherever you identify or however you identify, if you identify yourselves as a minority, whether it be gender minority, ethnic minority, or whether you consider yourself as part of the majority, do you think this representation plays a role in how we perceive others and ourselves? So go ahead and pause the video and answer that question. All right, so now to the last stretch of this video lecture here. Basically, the research shows that the more television you watch, the more likely you are to view the world in a way consistent with television's reality. Okay, so those who watch lots of television believe that their chances that they are victims of violence are 1,000 times greater than statistics suggest. Now, repeat that. People who watch lots of TV believe that they are going to become victims of violence at 1,000 times greater rate than statistics suggest. This is the mean world syndrome. If you watch more TV, you're going to think that the world is a mean and scary place and it's out to get you. Light viewers, on the other hand, are much more kind of inoculated against this, or they're immune to this mean world syndrome. Now, cultivation theory is not just about violence. It also shapes our view of body image, our beliefs about depression, the threats of ethnic minorities, okay, and sexuality. So let's unpack these a little bit. So we see in recent years more pushes to get greater representation of body image. People who watch TV feel that everybody is skinny. Men feel all men are muscular. Women feel that all women are petite and have thin waists. Cultivation theory helps us understand how body image is developed, but also threats of ethnic minorities, okay? So we see in shows like Homeland how people from the Middle East are framed and depicted as terroristic, okay, or as radical and extreme. This is the result of cultivation theory. When I was a kid, we didn't have depictions of people from the Middle East as, terrorists. Instead, we had the threat of the communist, right? So we watched Rocky, and we saw Rocky, training against the communist guy who's gonna, fight against, he's a biologically, genetically modified man who's the strongest man in the world from the Soviet Union, right? Our threats of ethnic minorities are shaped based on cultivation theory. So basically, attitudes are developed through two things. Mainstreaming. These are the two parts of cultivation theory, by the way. Mainstreaming and resonance. Mainstreaming basically says heavy viewers develop a common view of social reality based on their frequent exposure to the repetitive and dominating images, stories, and messages on TV. And then there's resonance. This is the congruence between a viewer's own violent experiences and those they see on TV, forcing them to replay the violence they experience on television. So, for instance, an example of resonance. If you grew up in the New York City area, right, during 9/11, okay, and you heard the names of all of the people who plotted the terrorist attacks against the World Trade Center, whenever you saw names that look like that again, you would likely have a resonance experience where you would associate the names of people who have, Muslim-sounding names or Arabic-sounding names with the violence that you experienced, okay, growing up around New York City during 9/11. That's resonance, okay? So what I would like you to do is I want you to answer one final question. This is question 7. I would like you to answer, do you feel influenced by your favorite shows? And provide an example. So question 7, do you feel influenced by your favorite shows? And just offer some examples of how you feel influenced. So just reflect on your favorite shows in light of what we talked about today. Cultivation theory. It doesn't just have to be the mean world syndrome. It can be on body image. It can be on, attitudes around depression. There's many things we can think about how television has shaped our mind. So that's it. I don't want to keep going on. This is already 15 minutes plus the 7 from the beginning. So thank you so much. That is, the sum of chapter 13. That's cultivation theory. Have a great day. Bye.